Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on remifentanil pharmacokinetics. Let me introduce Pauline Trenard. Pauline Trenard is our applications manager at Lixoft, and she's going to present today's case study. For the questions, so you can ask questions during the presentation. Please use the Q&A section in the WebEx interface, and we're going to answer them at the end. So we will start by a 40-minute presentation and then have around 20 minutes time for questions at the end. I now give the ball to Pauline.
Thank you. So in this webinar, I will show how to use Monolix to build a population pharmacokinetic model for remifentanil. So remifentanil is an opioid analgesic drug with a rapid onset and a rapid recovery time, and it is used for sedation and anesthesia. It is given in adults via continuous IV infusion with doses that may be adjusted to age and weight of patients. This modeling workflow will be based on a data set of dense PK measurements on 65 healthy adults who have received remifentanil IV infusion. So first, I will explore the data set with the data viewer integrated in Monolix. This application allows to identify properties of the data set leading to modeling hypotheses. Then I will use Monolix to quickly test a population pharmacokinetic model according to this hypothesis and evaluate this model with statistical tests and diagnostic cuts. This will allow me to identify the covariates that influence remifentanil PK. So first, let's have a look at the data set in Excel. The data set contains a column for the IDs of the individuals, the times of measurement, and remifentanil's administration characteristics such as the amount of drug and the rate of infusion. So for each individual, the infusion rate is constant, and the duration of infusion is between 4 to 20 minutes. But the duration of infusion is not needed in the data set because it can be deduced from the amount and the rate of infusion. Then there is a column VV for the observations, and in addition, several covariates are available, such as the age, the sex, the lean body mass, or LBM. And moreover, for a purpose of display only, a covariate PINSCAT has been added to classify the patients in several categories with identical infusion duration. So let's now open this data set in Monolix. So I can open a new project in Monolix and load the data. This is the data set that I have just shown you. Monolix infers the types of the columns which have standard names in the header, such as the ID, time, amount, infusion rate, DV as observation, age as continuous covariate, sex as categorical covariate, and then I have to set LBM as a continuous covariate and PINSCAT as a categorical covariate. And then I can accept. I can then open the data viewer to explore the properties of this data set. So the data viewer automatically generates a number of plots to visualize the data. And first, we see the remifentanil concentration over time. So we can see that the concentration increases during the infusion, which is quite long, and then it decreases. I can choose a log scale on the y-axis to focus on the elimination phase. So this plot is a bit crowded, so I can use the panel Stratify in the data viewer to split the data by infusion time category. So I select PINSCAT as a stratification group, and then I can use the split option. Because there are many groups and some of the groups contain only one or two individuals, I can reorder the groups to put together infusion durations which are close to get only 4 groups. So I get subplots with subpopulations that are a bit more homogeneous. And I can notice that the elimination of remifentanil in log scale is nonlinear just after the infusion. So it suggests to use a PK model with several compartments. Then I can also color these curves based on some covariate values to see possible covariate effects. For example, I can create two groups of individuals based on the LBM value and use the option color to color the curve. I can also scale my two groups to get an equal count of individuals. Based on this plot, you can see that there might be an effect of LBM on the pharmacokinetic because the individuals with low LBM value seem to have lower concentrations, although it is not very clear in this case. Then I can do the same with age and color by age instead of LBM. And on this plot on the top left, I can see here again that there might be an effect, covariate effect of age on the pharmacokinetic, but it's not very clear. And then just to check, I can also do the same with sex. And here again, there might be an effect. But such covariate effect will be investigated further in monoliths later on. Finally, I can remove the stratification and display covariates on the axis to check for correlations. For example, I can look at LBM over sex, and this allows me to check the distributions of LBM values in each category. So here, as expected, males have higher LBM values than females. Then LBM over age, I can overlay the correlation coefficient between these two continuous covariates, and I see that there is a small negative correlation between the two. So to summarize this data exploration, I have gained the following insights. First, a model with several compartments seems necessary to describe this data set. Second, LBM and age might have an effect on the pharmacokinetics, and LBM and age are negatively correlated, and males have higher LBM values than females. So I can then move on to the model building process while keeping in mind these properties that can guide the modeling process. So I can quit the data viewer and go back to monoliths. When I click on next, a new tab appears for the next step in the modeling workflow, which is to define a structural model. So thanks to the data exploration, I know that I should try an infusion model with at least two compartments. This model is available in the Monolix PK library. So I can open the library, choose the PK library, and filter all the models available in this library to get an infusion model with two compartments and a linear elimination. Here there are three models that are equivalent and that have different parameterizations. So I can choose the first one here, where the four parameters are the two compartment volumes, V1 and V2, the clearance CL, and the intercompartmental clearance Q. Once this model has been loaded, the next step in the Initial Estimates tab is now to select initial population values for these parameters. And we can check how the population predictions based on the initial values in red fit the individual data in blue. When I change some initial value, I see in real time the effect on the population predictions. So here the goal is to manually choose reasonable initial estimates to speed up the convergence. Even if Monolix is pretty robust with respect to initial parameter values, it is a good practice. And in particular, I should try to find population parameter values so that the prediction displays the key features of the model. So for a two-compartment model, this will mean the two slopes in the elimination phase on log scale. So I can choose the log scale for the y-axis and then play a bit with these parameter values to get a reasonable agreement in log scale. So for example, I can increase V1. I can also enter new values with my keyboard. More simply. With these values here, I can see the two slopes in the elimination phase. So I can accept these initial values by clicking on Set as Initial Values. Now the Statistical Model and Tasks tab can be used to adjust the statistical model, which is composed of the observation model in the middle and the individual model in the bottom. And I can also run some estimation tabs and perform some model evaluation on the top. The default statistical model is composed of a combined residual error model that can be displayed by clicking on Formula. It links the predictions and the observations with an additive and a proportional term. As a first step, we aim at evaluating the structural model, so therefore I will keep the default error model. The default distribution for the parameters are log normal, and here I have no reason to choose another distribution than log normal for now. In formulas, I can see how the population parameters for the fixed effects are associated with the random effects that are named eta. For now, I will also ignore correlations between parameters and covariate effects. Once all the elements of the model have been specified, it is important to save the project. This way, the results of all the tasks run afterwards will be saved as text files in a folder next to the project file. So I save the project with a name, for instance, pk1.mlxtran. This .mlxtran file is a text file that contains all the elements defining the project. Then I can run some tasks to estimate the parameters and evaluate the model. To evaluate quickly the structural model, I will run only the population parameter estimation and use the result to diagnose the model. So I click on population parameters to run the SAEM algorithm. Here, a pop-up window opens where I can follow the estimation of the parameters over the iterations of the algorithm and check the convergence. I can see that in addition to the 4 parameters for the fixed effects, there are also 4 parameters called omega to estimate that are the standard deviations of the random effect. And there are the 2 parameters A and B for the residual error model. This algorithm works in 2 phases. Before the red line, the first phase explores the parameter space, and then an automatic criteria is used to switch to the second phase to stabilize the convergence towards the local minimum. And once this is done, the estimated values can be found in the tab Results in this table. Then the last iterations of the SAEM algorithm are also used to calculate a rough estimation of the individual parameters, which can be used for a first evaluation of the model without running another estimation task. So to assess the model, I can run the task plot to generate some diagnostic plots. These plots now appear in the tab Plots. And the first plot is individual fits, where we can see the individual predictions overlaid with the individual data. For this plot, I can choose a log scale on the y-axis to see better the elimination phase. And I can also zoom on the last time for all the plots with a linked zoom on the x-axis. I noticed that low concentrations are not well fitted for almost all the individuals. So the 2 compartments model seems unable to capture the different slopes of the elimination phase. I can browse through the individuals to check this. And I can also have a look at the plot's observations versus predictions. On this plot, I can choose a log scale to focus on the low observations. I can see that the points for low concentrations confirm the misspecification. And if I hover on some outlier points, I see that they all correspond to long time. So this is coherent with what I have seen in the individual fits. So these diagnostic plots suggest to try a structural model with 3 compartments in order to capture the different slopes that can be seen in the data. Therefore, I go back to the Structural Model tab. Here I can see the 2 compartments model that has been used so far, and I can load from the library an infusion model with 3 compartments. Here again, there are 3 models available that are equivalent with different parameterizations, and I can choose the first one with the clearance. As previously, I have to select reasonable initial values for the parameters in log scale. And here, because I have done this before, I know that if I choose 5 for V2, let's say 0.5 for Q3, and something bigger for V3, it shows me a quite reasonable fit. I can accept this. I can then keep the default statistical model, and I save the project in a new file that I will name pk2.mlxtran. And then I can run the population parameter estimation task as well as the diagnostic plot together by clicking on the green arrow here, Run Scenario, because these 2 tasks are selected in the scenario, so the tasks that are selected in the scenario are the ones colored in blue. And now there are 12 parameters to estimate in addition to the 2 parameters for the residual error model. I can now check that the individual fits should show much better fits for the elimination phase. I can also have a look at the plot observation versus prediction in log scale. And indeed, here there is no more specification. So I consider the 3 compartments model as my final structural model. Now I can estimate individual parameters and assess the fits more precisely to evaluate improvements that might be brought to the statistical model. So to estimate individual parameters, I run the task EVEs, which computes the empirical bias estimates that are the mode of the conditional distribution for each individual. These values are the most likely parameters for each individual. And the summary of these values can be found in the tab results in individual parameters. Now, if I want to get all the estimates for the individual parameters, I can click on this icon here to open the results folder that contains all the results of the estimation task as text files. So I can find all the parameters in the subfolder individual parameters. Then the next task, conditional distribution, estimates each individual conditional distribution by sampling a set of values from the conditional distribution of each individual via Markov chains Monte Carlo. And the results of this task will increase the performance of model diagnostic plots by taking into account the uncertainty of the individual parameters. So this will circumvent the phenomenon of shrinkage that can affect EVEs, in particular when the data is sparse. This task also computes a set of statistical tests that can be seen here in the section tests of the tab results, but I will come back to these tests later. For now, I can compute also standard errors for the population parameter estimate. With this task, I can calculate the Fisher information matrix via linearization of the model or via stochastic approximation with the exact model if this option here, use linearization method, is unchecked. The linearization method is faster and useful for large projects, but here I can choose the stochastic approximation, which is usually more precise. Once this is done, the correlation matrix of the estimate is now displayed in the section standard errors of the tab results. I can also see the standard errors and the relative standard errors associated with each parameter in the table of the population parameter estimate. So I can check that all parameters have a reasonable standard error, meaning that they are estimated with good confidence. Then I can estimate the log likelihood with a dedicated task because the algorithm SAEM is not required to compute the log likelihood. Here, again, it is computed either via linearization or via importance sampling if this option is unchecked. This is what I choose here, and in this case, it is computed with a Monte Carlo procedure. So this will be useful especially for the comparison of this model to more complex models later on. And once this is done, I obtain the value for the log likelihood, as well as for information criteria such as AIC or BIC in the tab results. Then finally, I can run the plot again. With this new plot, I can first check that there is no specification of the individual parameter distribution. So I can have a look at the plot distribution of the individual parameters. This shows the empirical distributions of the individual parameters as histograms, overlaid with the theoretical parameter distribution. Note that by default, these plots are based on the unbiased estimators sampled from the conditional distributions rather than conditional mode or conditional mean, which can cause eta shrinkage. Then on the plot distribution of the random effect, I can see the standardized random effect plotted as box plots, and the random effects are expected to follow a standard normal distribution. So this is represented by the horizontal lines, which are the median and quartiles. So these two plots for the distribution do not hint at any misspecification for the models of the individual parameters, so I can keep the long-normal distribution. Now, I would like to assess whether the unexplained inter-individual variability may be reduced via the inclusion of covariates into the population PK model. Such effect can be suggested by correlations between covariate values and individual parameters, and in monoliths, I can identify such correlations with the help of diagnostic plots and statistical tests. So we'll begin with the plot, individual parameters versus covariates. Here, the transformed parameters appear in Gaussian space with respect to each covariate in the dataset. I can overlay the correlation coefficients on the plot corresponding to continuous covariates by clicking on information, and I notice correlations between some covariates and some parameters. For example, between CL and age, there is quite high correlation. Again, by default, Monolith uses in the diagnostic plot samples from the conditional distribution, as you can see here, as individual estimates, because this method avoids the biases associated with conditional modes or conditional means that can show non-existing correlations. So these scatter plots and box plots are useful to check the shape of the relationships between parameters and covariates, and if needed, particular individuals can be highlighted and identified, but here nothing stands out, so I can now get more information on the correlation with the result of statistical tests that are summarized in the tab result in the section test. So here I can see the statistical test for each pair of covariates and parameter that are checked with Pearson correlation test for continuous covariates and ANOVA test for categorical covariates. And the p-values of these tests are colored according to their significance. So it is really easy here to identify significant correlations. So I can see that age is significantly correlated to all parameters except Q2 and Q3, and LBM is significantly correlated to CL, V1, Q3, V3, and sex is as well correlated to some parameters. So for relatively simple models such as this one, I can do a stepwise manual method for the covariate search, meaning that I will add covariates one by one, starting with the most significant correlation and checking at each step that the contribution to the individual parameter variability is also significant. This allows also the modeler to control each step of the model building process. So with this approach, I should first add the covariate age on CL because it is associated with the lowest p-value. But before modifying the statistical model, I can change the initial estimate to reuse here the results from the parameter estimation. This will decrease the time of convergence. So I click on Use Last Estimate to store the previous solutions as new initial values for the next run. And then I can add a parameter covariate relationship in this part of the interface. So if I check this box here, age is added linearly to the transform parameter CL. As I can see, if I click on the formulas, so here CL has a log normal distribution, so the covariate age is added linearly on log CL with a new population parameter, beta CL age. But this corresponds to an exponential relationship. However, I would rather like a power law relationship with centering. So for this, I need to replace age by a centered log normal transformation of age. So I will define this as a new covariate by clicking here on Add Covariate Continuous. And in this window, I can define a new covariate with a formula. If I hover on age, I can see some statistics of age from the data set. So that this can facilitate the centering. I can take the mean, 46.98, as a typical value for age. So I can define a new covariate that I can call TH, for example, as the log of age divided by the typical value, which is the mean in the data set. Then I can replace age by CH, and this now corresponds to a power law. So the new parameter beta CL CH now has to be estimated. But before running, I will save this modified project in a new file that I will call pk3.mltry. Now I can run the scenario with all the tasks. So I will select them all, and I will select the linearization method before running so that it will be faster to compute the standard errors and the log likelihood. I can then run the scenario, and I can see here that the parameter beta CLTH now has to be estimated. But the other parameters are faster to estimate because as I have started from the initial values taken from the last estimate. So once this is done, the estimate for beta CLTH is now available here. I can check that the standard error is not too high. And the standard error task has also computed a wild test on the individual estimate of beta to check that it is significantly different from 0, meaning that the relation between the parameter and the covariate is real. So the p-value of this test can be seen here, and it is significant, which validates the covariate effect. Moreover, the estimate for omega CL, the standard deviation of the random effect of CL, has decreased because some of the inter-individual variability of this parameter is now explained by the covariate age. Moreover, I can check that the log likelihood, as well as the AIC and the IC, have decreased a little bit. The value for the AIC, for example, was closer to 7,300 before. This shows that the fit has improved. Now, in the tab test, I can find the details of the one test that I have shown you, whose p-value I have shown you on the population parameters table. And I can also check that eta CL is no longer correlated to age because the correlation is now taken into account in the model. Of course, I can identify remaining correlations that suggest to complete the model with additional covariate effects. So here the next step would be to add LBM on V1 because it is associated with the smallest p-value. However, in this webinar, I won't take the time to perform a full covariate search. So instead, I will show the case now of a categorical covariate, like text, which is significantly correlated to V1 as well. So let's see how we can add the covariate effect for sex. First, I will use the last estimate as new initial values to keep the result for beta CLTH here. Then I can just check the parameter V1 in the column text without transforming the covariate. And I can check in formulas how the covariate relationship is encoded with a new parameter beta V1 sex M. So I can save now this modified project under a new name TK4. And then I can run the scenario. So with this second run, you can see that a stepwise covariate search is really feasible because each run is quite fast. And I will show just after this run the result of a full stepwise covariate search for this model. Also, I can take the opportunity to say that we will soon release an R package called RSNLX that will contain a function to perform an automatic covariate search with the same stepwise method with MODULX. So for now that the scenario has finished, I can just check the estimates for my new parameter beta, the standard error, and the wild test for the new parameter. Now let me show you the model that I have obtained after a full stepwise covariate search, which is this one. The final covariate model includes TH on all parameters except V1 and the mean-centered log transformation of LBM on CL, V1, and V3. And correlations with the covariate sex actually turn out to be all insignificant. This is because sex is also correlated to LBM, as we have seen in the data exploration. So these correlations are taken into account by the inclusion of LBM in the covariate model. I can check that all the parameters beta that are here are significantly different from 0. And in statistical test, I can check that there is no remaining significant correlation, between the covariate and random effect. Now I will move on to adjusting the statistical model with correlations between random effects. Such correlation effects can also be identified with the diagnostic plot and the statistical set. Let's see in plots. We can find a scatter plot for each pair of random effects here. And on this scatter plot, correlation coefficients can be displayed by clicking on information. And I can select some parameters to better see what is going on, because here I have many parameters. So for example, I can focus on the last 3 random effects, like this. And here I see, for example, that there is a high correlation between Q3 and V3. Then in the statistical test, in the tab results, I can also find the p-values corresponding to this coefficient by clicking here on random effects. And here I see a table with all the Pearson correlation tests corresponding to this correlation, with the p-values associated with each test. So similarly to the covariate search, we usually add the relevant correlations to the model one by one, starting with the most significant correlation, so the lowest p-value. And I will show the first step of this process in this webinar, which is to add the correlation between Q3 and V3, because it is the lowest p-value. So first I will use the last estimate as new initial values. Then I can define the correlation between Q3 and V3 in this part of the interface as the first correlation group. Then if I want to add other correlation groups, I can just click here and create a new correlation group. For now, I will save this project under a new name, for example, TK5. And then I will run the scenario. So in addition to all the parameters of the model, I now have a parameter called core V3Q3 that is being estimated, and that encodes the correlation between the two parameters. Once the scenario has finished, I can have a look at the estimate for this parameter here and check that its standard error is not too high. Then in the statistical test, I can check remaining correlations between random effects. And here you can see that the p-value for the significant correlation between Q3 and V3 is not colored anymore. This is because this correlation is now already taken into account in the model, so the model is in agreement with this information. But we still see the significant correlations that are not included in the model as colored in red, which suggests that we can improve the statistical model. So now let me show the final model obtained after a stepwise covariate search followed by a correlation search. Here it is. So in addition to the covariate model that I have shown before, it includes also the correlation between Q3, V3, and CL, and also a correlation between Q2 and V2. And all of these parameters have been estimated, can be found here, with a good confidence. To perform a further evaluation of this model, I can now generate the visual predictive check. And for this, I can open the list of the plots here and select the visual predictive check before running the task, or I can directly generate the VPC by clicking on this green arrow. And the VPC now appears here. The goal of the VPC is to compare the empirical median and percentiles that are computed from the data set and represented as blue curves, as we can see on the legend, to the prediction intervals represented as blue and pink areas. So it is a useful tool to assess graphically whether simulations from the model are able to reproduce both the central trend and the variability in the observed data. And also, it is based on a high number of simulations. By default, it's 500 simulations. It is really fast to generate. Here, I will choose corrected predictions to take into account the high heterogeneity encoded in the data set. And I find that the result is satisfying, which means that the predictive power of this model is high with respect to the data set. I can really check this by choosing the log scale on the y-axis. And here I see that there is still some discrepancy at low observations that are indicated with red areas. We may hypothesize that BLQ data have been observed but were excluded from the data set, and that could explain this discrepancy. Now all the diagnostic plots can be stratified just as we have seen with the data viewer during the data exploration. And for example, here I can stratify the VPC. I will just remove the legend beforehand. And I can, for example, split the VPC according to the categorical covariate T-INFCAT to better see the predictions for more homogeneous subpopulations. And with this, I can zoom a bit on this part here, and I can see that the remaining discrepancies affect mainly the subplots corresponding to T-INFCAT equals 20, which is the group with the most variability in the data set. So all in all, overall, this model fits quite well the data set. Then as the last step of the model assessment, we can check that the convergence and the estimates are robust to different initial estimates. To this end, I can launch a convergence assessment tool with this gray button here. This tool will execute multiple runs of parameter estimation and model evaluation with different seeds and different random initial values of fixed effects. And it will return a graphical report that allows to compare the convergence and the parameter estimation and the estimate between runs. So when I click, this window opens where I can choose the number of runs used for the assessment and also the tasks performed during each run and the parameters checked for sensitivity. So here I can choose to estimate the standard errors and the log likelihood without linearization to get precise results over 5 replicates with randomly picked initial values for all parameters. And then I can run this like this. So I can check in real time the convergence in each run. Of course, we won't take the time now to wait until it finishes. So I will stop this and I will show you the result that I have put here. So this is a graphical report that you get at the end of the convergence assessment. Here on this window, you can see the iteration of the SIM algorithm for each of the 5 runs. And you can check that the convergence is similar in each run. And then here you can see, you can compare the population parameter estimate with the horizontal line that indicates the standard error. So these 2 figures show a good convergence of all the replicates to the same minimum. And then on this third figure, you can check also the convergence of the importance sampling that computes the log likelihood. So to conclude, during this demo, I have used Monolix to easily build a population model for remifentanil pharmacokinetics. Each step of model modification was guided by diagnostic plots and statistical tests to check the accurateness of the model and its properties. And this allowed me to do a manual covariate search that revealed the dependency of several parameters on the age or the lean body mass. And now I could import this model with the R package Simulink to be simulated, either with its initial dataset or with new specifications like different treatments, for example, or different number of subjects or different covariates. In this way, I could, for example, simulate clinical trials to determine the best dosing protocol, or also assess the uncertainty of the results according to the number of individuals, for instance.
Thanks a lot, Pauline, for this very nice presentation. I now would like to move on to the session for questions. So feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A section of the WebEx interface, and I will read them loud so that Pauline can answer. So the first question I see is about the convergence indicator that we see in the pop-up window during the SAM algorithm. So what is it exactly, this convergence indicator?
So this indicator is linked to the log likelihood, but it's not exactly the same. As I have said, the SIM algorithm does not require to compute the log likelihood, but here it's a complete likelihood. So it's computed a bit differently, but it still allows to check the overall convergence.
So feel free to ask questions. That's the right moment to have all your answers, all your question answers. Maybe a question about the error model. As far as I could see, we didn't really check different type of error models for this data set. So what would be the different error models that would be available? And would it, for example, be possible, if needed, to implement a custom error model?
Okay, good question. I can show it in Monolix. So let's have a look at the interface. So the list of the error models that are available is here. So in addition to the combined model that I have shown, there is another combined model with a slightly different formula, and the constant and the proportional error model with only the terms A or the term B. So here in this case, I haven't shown it because the combined model is actually the best one for this data set. but we could check some other error models, and the best way to compare the models would be to compare the log likelihood value or the information criteria. And if you want a more complex models or different models than the ones available here, you can write your own model in the file, in the Malixtran file. But I think that maybe Geraldine can give some more information on the residual error models.
Yeah, so for the residual error model, the only ones that are available are those in the list as Colin has shown. For the moment, that's the only one you can use. What we are going to try for the next release is to be more flexible on the residual error model such that you can code your own one. Okay, so the next question is about the outputs. How do the outputs in Monolix compare to those in other softwares, such as NonMem or Phoenix NLME, for instance?
So we can have a look at the outputs in the result folder. So for example, for this project here, all the outputs are available in a text file in table format, in addition to a summary that contains the results of all the estimation tasks that have been computed. And then you get also a table of the predictions for all individuals, the population parameters table, and then all the information that has been estimated in the estimation task. And you can also get the output of the plots. So all the points that have been used to generate this plot can be exported as chart data, so as tables that you can use then to regenerate your own plots. For instance, if you want to change a bit the display, you can use your favorite software to generate your own plots based on the chart data.
And is it possible to export the plots directly as an image, for instance?
And the plot can be exported as an image with the button here, export. You can export as PNG or as SVG. And also in the project settings, you can choose to export all the plots at each run automatically, and they will be saved in the same folder that contains the results of the project.
Okay, thanks. And what about prediction-corrected VPCs? Are they available in Monolix?
So this is something that I can put in here. I lost my. Okay, so I had a predicted correct VPC with corrected predictions, but I lost it. But anyway, so this is something that I have shown in this webinar. It's predictions corrections are available, and you just have to check the option in the settings of the plot, and then it is applied to the VPC.
I now have two questions about shrinkage. So is it necessary to investigate shrinkage for this example, for instance? And I have a related question about the estimation of the conditional distribution. How does it work exactly?
Okay, so shrinkage can be a problem usually when you use the EBEs as individual estimates. But here, because Monolix uses samples from the conditional distribution, in principle, you should circumvent the phenomenon of shrinkage, and so you don't really have to investigate the presence of shrinkage or not for each project, because you shouldn't be affected by the biases caused by shrinkage. Now, how the conditional distribution is estimated. So these stats perform a sample, multiple samples from the individual conditional distribution for each individual parameter, and this is a way to assess not only the most likely value for each parameter, but also a set of values that represent really the uncertainty of this parameter. And so instead of working with just one value for each individual parameter, you work with a set of values that represent the variability, the uncertainty of this parameter.
Okay, so the next question is about remifentanil's pharmacokinetics directly. And so there was a model published in the 19th about this molecule, and this work was done in non-MEM. So the question is, have we investigated how MONOLIX results compare to the non-MEM results in the paper? And they're very close. So the data set is exactly the same as the one used in the paper. And basically, the final model that we find is very, very close. I think there is one covariate that is slightly, so one parameter covariate relationship that is slightly different, but all the rest is really very, very close, both the parameter estimates and the influence of covariates. The next question is about how categorical covariates can be used in 2018 versus 2016 version. So in the 2016 version, it was possible to have a categorical covariate influencing the standard deviation of the random effect. So for example, to assume that male and female have different typical population parameter values, but also different standard deviations. And this is something that is not possible anymore in the 2018 version because of technical reasons. The next question is about bootstrapping. So in these examples, we have looked at the relative standard errors computed via the Fisher information matrix, but for example, would it be possible to compute them via bootstrapping to assess the stability of the PK parameters? So in this version of MONOLIX, it is not possible. However, there is a bootstrapping function that is included in the R package RSMLX, which I was talking about previously, that will be released very soon. And with this, it will be possible to perform easily bootstrapping with MONOLIX by calling it from R. Exactly. So this package, RSMLX, it will come out like within this week, so very, very soon. And it will include functions in the bits in the same style as PSN. So it will be possible to do automatic covariate search, bootstrap, and profile likelihood mainly, and a couple of other small nice functions. I'll have a very precise question next. How do you change the number of iterations for the Markov chain Monte Carlo? Okay, and the person figured it out. So I guess I guess this was very precise. So if the person finds it out by himself, that's fine. Anyway, we encourage you to have a look at you see that there are different settings for each task in the scenario, and we encourage you to just have a look at the settings if you want to perform some specific settings for your estimation. Okay, I do not see any further questions. So thanks a lot for your attention. And so we will put the recording online, so you will be able to listen to it again if you want to, or to share it with colleagues, etc. Thanks a lot and have a good day. Bye-bye.